This program has a habit of coinciding with momentous and controversial occurrences that our first speaker always seems to find himself right in the middle of. Last year, it was James Comey's firing, the week of our forum, drew a lot of attention from the media and those our friends on the left. And this year, not only do we have the withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, but also we had the widely covered confirmation hearing for Gina Haspel to head the CIA, which Senator Burr chaired. As chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, Senator Burr is tasked with one of the most important roles in our government. I believe that all North Carolinians should take pride in the way he handles this role with grace, wisdom, and integrity. Please welcome Senator Richard Burr.
John, thank you for that introduction. My apologies for my tardiness. Please start eating if you haven't done it. I know we've got a number of speakers, and I'll try to be as brief as I can. John didn't do justice. I have never been on an interstate that was totally shut down. When my staff called to find out what was up ahead of us, they said it had become a crime scene. But over the next 47 minutes, I saw them turn an entire interstate around and head the other way. And I've gotten text messages from everybody who's probably supposed to be filling these seats that said, "Are you stuck in this too?" And eventually they said, "We're aborting." So I think it would be appropriate, given that I was asked to talk about trade and foreign policy, that I'm going to do it exactly backwards. I want to give you the speech in reverse, and it must have been divine intervention that had that traffic turn around, because what I was thinking through in my mind to say to you about it really doesn't make any sense if I tell it to you from forward to backwards. So I'll give you the takeaway at the start. Helen Keller was asked one day, could she think of anything worse in life than to lose her sight? And her answer was this: to have my sight and lose my vision. Now I want you to think about that, because it really explains a lot of things that are going on right now, both from a policy and a trade standpoint, and from a media coverage and the American people's reaction standpoint. So, Art, I want to thank you and the foundation for your continuing support and for what you do at not only education, but at trying to set the truth out. And we need more of those efforts right now, especially in higher education. But the president came into office, and he came in with one real theme: make America great again. And I think from those of us who have run, we thought, God, this is a really great one line. Everybody understands it. But I'm not sure that I or anybody else stopped to think about what that meant, and more importantly, what it meant to him. The president wanted to change the landscape that we negotiated from. He wanted to change America back to where we negotiated from a position of strength, whether we were negotiating a trade agreement or whether we were negotiating a security agreement. And what he had seen is he had seen a decade where America had really marginalized ourselves as a world power. We'd marginalized ourselves from a standpoint of our use of our military to project strength, and we marginalized ourselves from a standpoint of economic strength. As a matter of fact, the Obama administration believed that for us to grow over 2% was to pull away from other people, and we wanted the rest of the world to grow because we need a larger market. What grew in that period was China at double-digit rates of growth. And not only did their economy grow at double-digit rates of growth, their ability to field a military infrastructure grew at a pace that far exceeded their economy. Under the 8 years of Barack Obama, the landscape of the world changed in large measure because America did not project the strength that America always had displayed since the Second World War, both economically and militarily. What the president recognized was that we can't get there if government is not challenged to do differently these things like negotiations. So it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that the president immediately looked at NAFTA, Korea, TPP, trade with China, and said, whoa, whoa, wait a minute. We've got to change the rules of the road because we've gotten the wrong end of this. We've negotiated a bad deal. But he knew that he couldn't do it if, in fact, he couldn't do it from a position of strength. And the president has every day been out there talking about making America strong again. It is the centerpiece of what people think about when you say, name one thing about this president. And I think it's important that you understand that he's been focused on his vision of where to go. He's not concerned with his eyesight on a daily basis. The eyesight that you see interpreted is the media's interpretation of what he's doing. So we went through a period with North Korea where the media portrayed that he was headed down a road of nuclear confrontation. As a matter of fact, I sat down with many of the people that negotiated the last two deals to keep North Korea from becoming a nuclear power, Republican and Democrat. And when I sat down with them and asked them about the president's strategy, their response was, listen, I've been involved in two negotiations that we thought we had put them in a box that they could never be a nuclear power again. I'm willing to try anything. Well, I couldn't have told you 6 months ago that we'd be at a point where the president and Kim Jong-un were going to have a summit. And I don't know what the outcome of the summit's going to be, but if we allow the president to go in a position of strength, which he has shown militarily, then there's a chance that we could get a deal that's beneficial not just for us and them, but for the world. But you don't accomplish a position of strength by necessarily being the guy that's liked the most. You know, Senator Helms sort of taught me that. You're unable to use a big stick because people think you're bigger than life. And to some degree, I think that's a model that President Trump is trying to emulate. If you look at China, just as a trade example, you see the president engaged in a discussion now that could lead to a disruption. But what should comfort the American people is this is not attempting to try to create a permanent disruption in the trade relationship that we have. It's to try to create a playing field where both sides win, but more importantly, we understand the rules and we've got conditions that require people to live within it. Now, I'm not sure I'm telling you anything that you didn't already know. And I could insert Russia for Korea, I could insert Iran for Korea, I could insert Korea for the trade or the Southeast Asia and the TPP, or NAFTA for that fact. And I will say from a standpoint of NAFTA, I think in the next 4 weeks we will probably have an agreement on NAFTA. That will be done. Everybody will claim victory, and there are some areas of NAFTA that will be smoothed out and be much better for America. But for us, long-term, to negotiate these and to move forward through this administration, a position of economic strength means that we've got to have a sustainable growth in the U.S. economy. So if you've wondered why we focused on things like tax reform, regulatory reform, administratively, we haven't done as much legislatively. We have done through the Congressional Review Act. It's because we're trying to build the infrastructure, and the president realizes that you need the foundation, not just for 3% growth this year, but for 3%, 4% growth as far as the eye can see. If not, You haven't scared anybody in the international market. You'd be shocked to know that for now months we've been at the table negotiating with our friends in Great Britain on a bilateral trade deal. But we can only negotiate so far because of the requirements they have under Brexit to fully be out before they can sign into an agreement. But think about it. To negotiate a real bilateral agreement with the UK sets the table for what the conditions are going to be to negotiate with the European Union. What we've bought is a period of time where through tax reform, we grow the U.S. economy, we attract foreign capital to the United States, there's a tax incentive for people to deploy capital to create jobs, to build buildings, to buy equipment. We've got a rebirth of manufacturing in the United States where we were trending like this. Now we're at least level and we're beginning to see the line go up. There's every reason for us to replace some of the things that we're reliant on China for over the next 2 or 3 years with domestic supply, domestic production of those things. As that happens and the U.S. economy grows at 3 and 4%, it's not just China that's reliant on the U.S. consumer market. It's Europe, it's Southeast Asia, it's Mexico, it's Canada. We've changed our position of strength in negotiating trade agreements because of the American consumer. But this president realized that you can't grow an economy at that pace if you're not willing to put Americans back to work. And all of a sudden, 3.9% unemployment, lowest number in over 20 years. A trend line that looks extremely good, not just this year, but long term. Remember, tax reform would take 60 votes in the United States Senate to reverse. That's a comforting thing. But having the majority in both houses is even more comforting, because then you get to set the agendas. You get to frame what the debate's about in America. And I think as this year goes on, more and more Americans are going to realize the benefits of tax reform in their pocket as they begin to save more money. So I've given you at least my observations on why I think the president has approached things the way he has. What I haven't given you is the reason. I believe the reason is we're headed for a decade of disruption. I believe we're headed for a 10-year period where technology is going to change the way we do everything. It's going to change society, it will change economies, and it will change the geopolitical landscape around the world. If we're not ready for that, we'll lose. We'll lose economically, and we will lose from a standpoint of global security. While we patiently go through a historical process in the United States to approve new technologies, the rest of the world does not have the cumbersome process that we do in the United States. And it's every sector of our economy. It's from telecom to healthcare. At a time where I think innovation is actually going to present us cures to diseases, we've got an approval pathway that won't allow us to do it in the time frame to save people's lives. Does anybody believe that it takes China 2.5 years to procure a new technology in their military? It may not take 2.5 days. So from a national security standpoint, whether we're up against China or Russia or Iran, I'm not going to include North Korea right now because I'll put that off to the side. If we're not willing to change the architecture of the federal government, we're going to lose. So what's the reason the president exhaustively has challenged the rest of the world in the way that he has, and challenged the American people in what he does and how he does it? It's because he understands the need to change the architecture of the federal government. The private sector is going to change anyway, because the private sector is about profit or loss, profit or bankruptcy. Well, you know better than anybody, because most of you bitch at David and I about the loss side, where we spend too much money in the federal government. And trust me, it hurts us as much as it hurts you. But we can't change that model unless we change the architecture of government. It can't be just historically driven that we look at the way we've done things in the past and say that's the way we have to do it in the future. There are technologies today that will come out next year that 12 months later will be obsolete. Yet we've got a government structure and architecture that does not allow that to be approved in that 12-month period. Pretty soon, innovators and investors are going to look at the process and the architecture that we've got in America and say, why invest in this? Because there's no production out of it. So my point to you is that the president and this administration understands that we've got to take government through this transformation to where we handle things and we approve things and we integrate things and we drive innovation in a way that capital investors, but more importantly, the consumers actually see the benefits of it. America has been the innovator for decades. We have a rule of law and we protect intellectual property because we really want to provide the ability for innovators to come to America and innovate new things. The only thing that's changed is the speed with which new technologies are going to come to market. So do we have to look at the processes that we've got in place and change them to allow that to actually be fulfilled. So, to some degree, I'll end where I started. Is it more important to have your sight and lose your vision? Or forget about sight and focus on vision? I think the one thing that this administration can never be accused of is losing their vision. And I'm not going to stand up here and tell you 100% of the time I think they're right. I've had disagreements with them at certain times, and sometimes I think in hindsight I've been right and sometimes they've been right. But you know, we're used to that. I've had it with every administration. But I think what hurts me is that I've never seen the American people question one's reason like they question this president and this administration. I'm in the middle of a battle over the next 2 weeks over the most qualified individual to head the Central Intelligence Agency in the history of the agency. I might add, the first woman to ever be nominated. The political assault that is currently going on to ruin this woman's reputation is potentially the greatest loss to national security that this country has seen in my lifetime. It's tough to try to talk to the American people about something that they get absolutely no transparency in. But I've got to believe that each one of you are like my wife. She knows what I do. She knows when I travel. She never asked me where I was or what I did. She's just comforted at knowing that we do it and that we're good and we're the best in the world. And we only do that when we pick the best leadership possible to carry out that mission. I'll tell you personally, Gina Haspel is the right leadership at the right time for this agency. She is the only one that has the trust of not only legislators and administration, but she has the trust of her workforce at the CIA and her partners all around the world. She is uniquely positioned to take the CIA at one of the most challenging times in American history and move it forward in a way that America can sleep safely at night, knowing that she's in the role of director of the CIA. These things would not happen if it wasn't for the willingness of this president to go out and chart a new course. So even for Republicans, I think there are times where you sit at home, like me, and you say, gosh, I wish he'd say it differently. I wish he'd do it differently. I do the same thing. Don't ever sit at home and question why. Understand that he's got a clear focus of the vision that he's trying to carry out. And at the end of the day, that vision is to make America, to position America in a different place. So not only that we succeed, but the rest of the world succeeds because of our success. They're not penalized for our success, they succeed because of our success. We wouldn't have an opportunity to have leadership like we've got in this administration if it wasn't for folks like you who are willing to get out, invest, educate yourselves, and more importantly, to share with others why this is important. In my estimation, there's never been a more important period that I have served in than right now. I'm not telling you we're going to accomplish 100% of everything I think we should, but I think we can accomplish enough of it that this vision that the President has and that I think many Americans share will be successful. And it will only be successful because you stay engaged in the process. I can't tell you today that you're the beneficiary of it, but I can promise you this: your children and your grandchildren are the beneficiary of it. So for the national media that tries to paint David and I and our colleagues all about some personal gain, and to some degree, all the cast of characters that they pick to choose on today, that's not it. It's about a generation we will never meet that we're willing to do the things that we do. And I honestly believe you understand that better than anybody, because you're making an investment, and you have continually made an investment in generations yet to come. Thank you for allowing me to be here this morning.
Brian, would you get the microphone? Senator Burr has agreed to take some questions. Could you get the microphone for our audience? Senator Burr is going to take, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, and so the senator is going to take a few questions, and we'll have a mic that we'll pass around.
Free shot at me, I'd take it if I were you.
Right here.
Yes, sir.
Is Jeff Sessions doing the right job?
I believe Jeff Sessions is. He's in a very difficult situation. He had no choice but to recuse himself as he did at the beginning. I would love for Director Mueller to be through with his investigation. I think he's closer than maybe people believe. And I'm limited as to what I can say about it because I'm one of the 4 individuals that knew what the scope of his investigation was at the beginning, and I don't think he's grown too far outside of that scope. I think the difficult thing is you can't believe everything that you read in the paper. So there is a concerted media effort to try to paint this administration only one direction. At the end of the day, there will be multiple investigations that I think support the entirety of what America should be educated on. Director Mueller's piece of that is a very narrow piece. The congressional pieces are much bigger, and I hope that we're through with the Senate investigation in mid to late September, just to give you an idea. It's my belief that Mueller could probably finish earlier than that, or he would hibernate and let the elections go out. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And then we read the Wall Street Journal about some quote person from the Washington Post, but it gets so confusing at ground level what the world is going on.
Sure. You know, let me caveat it by saying things that happen in the intelligence world were never meant to be debated in public. That's what makes what we're doing very, very difficult right now, because the sources that we have to turn to interview, to get the facts, and to enable us to lay those facts out for you, in many cases are sources that could never be recognized publicly. If they did, they might have a problem with living. I would suggest to you that what Devin Nunes has asked for falls into that category, and I think that the Justice Department is doing everything they can to get that individual to a safe spot before this comes to any type of public head. I don't think it'll ever reach that point. I think that they have a very good understanding from the meeting yesterday, but make no mistake about it. This has not been an easy process for Devin or for me relative to the level of cooperation we've gotten out of the FBI and the Justice Department. And I say that with a great deal of admiration for what the Bureau does and for what the Justice Department has traditionally done. But special prosecutors, when they're appointed, feel like they have all the power, that they're really close to divine from a standpoint of their breadth of power. So it's made it challenging to be another investigation and to be told that there are certain people we can't talk to. I work for the American people. I can talk to anybody I want to, and the special prosecutor is not going to keep me from doing that. So I think Devin's just been a little more public than I have on the confrontations that we've had. At the end of the day, we're going to certify for the American people that we've covered this as thoroughly as the American people would expect us to.
Well, Brian's given me the mic, and that was sort of, you just answered my question, actually. And that was, in the media, Senator, you've been, compared to the investigation led by Chairman Nunes, you've been highly praised. The Senate Intelligence Committee's investigation has been superior to the House's. So I was going to ask you, after all of the dust has settled, what kind of advice would you give Chairman Nunes and how to have done it? Given that you're conducting what is universally considered the model investigation. I think you kind of answered it by sort of being a little less public, but I don't know whether you wanted to take an answer a little bit further.
Sure. I'd probably expand on it just a little bit for the comparison. The House Intelligence Committee has 34 members. I have 15. It's much easier to manage a group of 15 individuals and to minimize the political impact of it. Because of the size of the House Intelligence Committee, because of the simple majority rule there, there's very little history of the need for that level of bipartisanship, though it's existed in the Intelligence Committee there in the past, as it has in the Senate. But I think that the dynamics of the individuals, specifically Adam Schiff and his need to be on TV every 30 minutes, contributed greatly to the politicization of the investigation. And I think Devin did everything he had to do to try to get facts on the table. We're probably choosing a little different route in the Senate investigation, but that you shouldn't take that as a confidence on my part that we will end this with the same level of bipartisanship that we've displayed up to this point. I think we will have a separation, because we will have a disagreement on what the conclusion is. I've expected that since the beginning, but my intent was not to come to a conclusion. It was to present the facts to the American people and let them draw their own conclusions from it. That's still my intent, but it may be in a minority view on the final report that comes out. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. This may be not an open session question. It may be a closed hearing. So if it's closed hearing, we'll move on to the next question. But in light of open source news that's recently come to light, do you anticipate any review, congressional review or oversight of the Five Eyes Agreement in the future?
Of the Five Eyes Agreement?
Yes, sir. Or protocols?
No. No, I don't. We have partners, and then we have Five Eye partners. And there's a historical reason that that group exists. It's trust, it's geography, it's history. And it gives us the most it gives us as large of presence globally as one entity that we could have. And there are other partners out there that are every bit as good and every bit as helpful and even more capable, but the historical trust doesn't exist for them to be in a circle of love. And I think the unique thing about Five Eyes is that not only do we share things with them, they share things with us. Protecting the source of intelligence is absolutely crucial to the ability to have that level of trust, and Five Eyes have exemplified that since the Second World War. So I see very little change in it, but I don't want to give you the impression that there are not individual countries out there that we have such a bilateral agreement with that we share almost as much. It's just we may not share the source of the intelligence. One thing that's unique about the United States, not once in the 20 years I have served on the House or Senate Intelligence Committee have we gotten intelligence of a terrorist threat anywhere in the world, anywhere, that we haven't shared with the host country that information to try to stop that terrorist attack. That's Russia, that's China, it's Iran. It really doesn't matter where it happens. We feel we have an obligation that when we see something that's imminent, we share it with that host country. Thank you.